first question to you is that our current housing shortage means that a quarter of all young working adults are still living with their parents, and home ownership has collapsed among the under 35s. What I'd like to know is what the Conservatives plan to do to change this.
Well, I think, the next Conservative government would continue to prioritise house building and construction. And I think that is the single biggest thing that we can do, obviously, to make the difference. And obviously, things like looking as well, there's been a huge drive across all of the government departments to look at where we have land as a department, where we don't need it, and actually making sure that land is released. And also working with developers to make sure, so small developers, I was in the Treasury, I did some work on housing policy there, so making sure, for example, that small developers are supported to get on and build. If they've got sites, to make sure it's viable, economically viable for them to start building on those sites. So that can mean revisiting some planning conditions, because as you probably will be aware, there are some sites where somebody gets planning permission and then nothing happens for a number of years, often because there are conditions in place. So again, revisiting all that to see whether there are conditions that can be changed or lifted again to get more house building happening.
Philosophically, where we need to start is with a principle that housing shouldn't be treated primarily as a financial asset, which is how we're so often looking at it now. We need to treat houses as homes. And we've got a whole range of policies to address that, starting with one of the policies that we've announced already from the manifesto, saying that we actually want to build 500,000 new genuinely social rent homes. So that means genuinely affordable, not the fake affordable of 80% of market rents that we see talked about now. We want to build 500,000 new social homes. What we want to do is also end right to buy, so that we're not handing over public assets into private hands. We want to actually bring in security of tenure for private tenants. Because although lots of people do want to own their own home, one of the reasons at the moment why people are so desperate to own is that it's so miserable in private tenancies.
Actually, the problem is quite simple to describe, and so the solution, though difficult to deliver, is also simple to describe. We just don't build enough homes. That's it. We just haven't built enough homes for years and years, and it's not a party political point, because governments of different persuasions have not built enough homes, especially in those parts of the country where people want to live. We've estimated that you would need to build around 250,000 to 300,000 new homes every year over a sustained period of time. So one part of the solution is to free up the planning system, to make sure that local communities can still object to planning decisions and all the rest of it, but where you don't have unnecessary delays. And I think I think to be fair, most people would acknowledge that actually in the teeth of a fair amount of controversy, this government's done a lot to free up the planning system. I think if we were just to think bigger, we could actually solve a lot of this, and that's why I'm such a keen advocate of garden cities. We've done it before, Hatfield, Welwyn Garden City, these places were planned. They weren't little infills, they were big planned communities where people worried about the transport, the schools, the shops, the whole lot. I'd like to see a whole bunch of garden cities in those parts of the country where people want to live. I think that would really help people solve this generational injustice that you're talking about.
First thing is we want to bring empty homes back into use. Far too many empty homes there that aren't actually being used. We also want to look at putting more homes on former brownfield sites. Now this has been a problem in the past because there have been decontamination costs. But now the technology is advanced, so land that previously perhaps hasn't been built on can now be built on. It can be cleaned up very well, and we will give grants to developers to actually do that, to clean it up so they can build houses on it, and we'll exempt them from stamp duty on their first sale. And we plan by 2025 to put 1 million homes on brownfield sites in that way, and that can be done. And they will be affordable homes, so that will really, really help to tackle the housing crisis. The other thing I think it's important to say is, as you know, UKIP is very much in favour of immigration, but it's opposed to mass uncontrolled immigration. And at the moment we've got around 260,000 people, net migration, coming into the country. We've got 500,000 coming into the country, but because people leave as well, we've got around 260,000 new people coming into the country every year. So that's putting massive pressure on housing, and it's driving up prices.
Well, we do have to change it, and it's a massive problem. And of all the issues I think facing young people, however much they're earning actually, housing is, I would say, the top of the list. We've got a plan to build 200,000 homes a year, the Lyons Plan. It's the first, and I think it's recognised by the experts on this, it's the first comprehensive plan to build homes again in our country. It's about saying developers can't just sit on land waiting for it to accumulate in value, but we're going to give councils powers to say use the land or lose the land. That will help release land for housing. It's about making sure that when there's planning permission is granted in an area, it isn't buy-to-let landlords who are buying them up, but it's actually local people who can get first access to the housing. So it is about a plan to actually build more homes in our country.
So 1 in 4 25 to 39-year-olds are delaying starting a family. And in my own situation, my landlord told me only yesterday that he's going to put my rent up by £100 a month. There are now 9 million renters in this country. What are you going to do to improve conditions for them right now?
So the easiest thing to kind of say is, oh, let's put a control on rents, and I think there are other parties that say that, and it's really tempting to say that because it's just awful when you hear unscrupulous landlords, basically getting one over on people like that with the rent. I think the evidence is pretty clear though. If you did that, you'd then have a knock-on effect which wouldn't help anybody, because then you wouldn't have landlords coming in and investing and doing up properties and so on. So I'm not sure if that's the answer. I think having longer-term tenancies is crucial. So we've done this as a government. We've set out a model longer-term tenancy. I think we really need to put more pressure on the whole sector, on landlords, to use longer-term tenancy so that you don't have this chopping and changing. And so look, there are things which are happening, longer-term tenancies, stopping landlords evicting people with no reason and so on. But I'm very, very open to the idea that we need to do more. It's good to have a healthy rental market where people can rent affordably. It's not good if that's done in a way which exploits people who otherwise have got no other option.
What we're looking at in terms of rent caps is a situation where once you've got, say, the security of tenure, perhaps for 5 years, then your rent can't go up by more than inflation each year. So you have a sense that you're paying a fair rent, but it's not just escalating wildly as it is, for example, so often in London. We really have to look at the quality of our private rental housing in terms of insulation, standards of draft proofing. All of these kind of basic issues at the moment are a real problem when you look at the figures for the energy efficiency of private homes.
What we want to introduce is medium hold tenancies, so that you can negotiate a tenancy when you start of anything between 3 to 6 years. So that's a brand new initiative that we want to specifically try and tackle that problem. We'll also make jolly sure that the landlords can only evict people in extremis. We think it's been far too easy for landlords to make up excuses to evict people, and we definitely are going to stop that. It's very simple. You say, unless there are clear, obvious, very good reasons why you want to evict this person, then you can't. So we'll basically write into law more safeguards for tenants. It's got to be done. It's just gone too far the other way.
So many young people are renting privately, and they are getting a shockingly bad deal, And we've got a plan to change that too. So a proper register of landlords to guarantee the standard of accommodation, 3-year tenancies, not just 1-year tenancies, to give some security, predictable rent rises, not just like the free market out of control, which is what we have at the moment, and saying that letting agents won't be able to charge tenants anymore for a fee, because at the moment the letting agents charge the landlords and the tenants a fee. So I think I really understand the problems young people are facing, and it's a really big part of our plan.
Well, I think it's about balancing, isn't it? Regulations with what we don't want to see is the market becoming, so people pulling out of the market, so there's less rented accommodation, or there's more red tape for landlords and everything else. And what we don't want to see, I think we've seen in places like New York where you had rent controls, where actually what you've seen is that then landlords don't invest in their properties in order, so that's even, that's also a problem. So it is about balancing all of that. But we have taken action on landlords and letting agents and fees and transparency and that sort of thing. And I think there will be more, because I think, as goes back to my point before about housing, having a place to call home is very, very important.